Can you imagine the sheer terror of watching a self-proclaimed HOA enforcer aim a loaded gun at your child on your own front lawn, all because of a hummingbird feeder? That's the nightmare I lived through in our quaint little neighborhood of Sunny Elm Estates, where every hedge is trimmed to perfection and your mailbox shade must pass a rigid color code. I'm Linda, a retiree who dreamed of quiet mornings sipping tea and watching birds flit through the air, but instead, I found myself trapped in a suburban dictatorship ruled by Melissa, the HOA president with a clipboard sharper than a blade, and her boyfriend Derek, a part-time deputy with an ego bigger than our cul-de-sac. They thought they could intimidate anyone, until they targeted my daughter, Emily, a trained covert operative who just returned from classified missions abroad. Her calm under pressure was about to turn their power trip into a lesson they'd never forget. Picture yourself in Emily's shoes. You're hanging a feeder for the hummingbirds you've always loved, a small piece of peace after years of high-stakes operations. Suddenly, a man with a badge pulls a gun on you, and a smug woman with a clipboard smirks from the sidewalk. What would you do? Option 1. Stay calm, assess the situation, and use your training to de-escalate. Or Option 2. Confront them head-on, risking a dangerous escalation? Drop your choice, Option 1 or Option 2, in the comments below, and let's see how you'd handle this suburban showdown. While you're at it, please hit that subscribe button for daily narrated stories. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and your support means the world to us as we bring you more gripping tales like this one. We moved to Sunny Elm Estates for the serenity, those neat lawns, friendly potlucks with slightly overbaked casseroles, and the promise of a peaceful retirement for me and my husband, Tom. But no one warned us about Melissa. It started with little notes. Our flagpole was too tall per HOA Code 5.2, or our garden frog statue was non-compliant decor. We chuckled, thinking she was just a bored busybody. But then the fines rolled in. $10 for a non-standard mailbox latch, $250 for unapproved siding hue variance. Melissa wielded her power like a sledgehammer, and we were about to learn just how far she'd go to keep her iron grip on our neighborhood. Melissa wasn't just a neighbor. She was a suburban autocrat who seized the HOA presidency unopposed and rewrote the bylaws to ensure she'd never be challenged. Sunny Elm Estates had once been the kind of place where you'd wave at neighbors over white picket fences, where the scent of fresh-cut grass mingled with the laughter of kids riding bikes until the streetlights flickered on. It was a retirement dream for me and Tom. Quiet mornings with steaming mugs of tea, afternoons tending to our roses, and evenings at potlucks where everyone brought the same slightly overbaked green bean casserole. But Melissa shattered that dream, turning our haven into a battlefield where every blade of grass was a potential violation, every smile a suspect act of defiance. She chaired every HOA meeting with an iron grip, her visor casting a shadow over the room as she silenced any whisper of dissent with a glare that could curdle milk. She'd rewritten the voting procedures to favor her allies, proxies she controlled through intimidation, and made herself untouchable. It wasn't leadership, it was domination, plain and simple, cloaked in the pastel veneer of suburban order. Her rise to power wasn't sudden, it was a slow, insidious creep that we all missed until it was too late. 2 years ago, when she first ran for HOA president, no one else stepped up. We thought, it's just an HOA, who cares? That apathy was our fatal mistake. At first, Melissa played the part of a diligent neighbor. She organized bake sales with mismatched cupcakes, sent out cheery newsletters with clip-art borders of smiling suns, and reminded us to roll in our garbage bins by 8 p.m. sharp. But once she tasted power, it was as if a switch flipped. She began issuing fines for the smallest infractions. $15 for a non-compliant mailbox flag, $50 for a too vibrant flower bed, $30 for a non-standard welcome mat, and her tone shifted from friendly to commanding. She'd stride through the neighborhood with her schnauzer, Biscuit, on a monogrammed leash, her clipboard a weapon she wielded with the precision of a general. I still remember the first time she showed up at our door, her tape measure gleaming in the sunlight as she measured our mailbox post with a surgeon's focus. "It's 3/4 of an inch too tall, Linda," she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. Her lips pursed into a lemon-sucking grin. "Code 5.2. I'll have to fine you $60. I laughed, thinking it was a joke, But the fine arrived the next day, printed on official HOA letterhead with her signature scrawled at the bottom in sharp, accusatory ink. To understand Melissa's tyranny, we need to go back further. Before she moved to Sunny Elm Estates, Melissa had been a mid-level manager at a local insurance firm, where she'd been passed over for promotions time and again. Neighbors whispered that she'd been let go after a heated argument with her boss, her need for control clashing with the company's collaborative culture. She arrived in our neighborhood with a chip on her shoulder, determined to prove her authority in a new arena. The HOA became her kingdom, and we, her unwitting subjects. She'd sit at the head of the clubhouse table during meetings, her visor tilted at a commanding angle, and dictate new rules with a fervor that felt personal. "Uniformity is harmony," she'd say, her voice echoing through the room as she fined Mr. Thompson for a tiny fish sticker on his mailbox, a sticker his grandson had placed there during a visit. It wasn't about the rules, it was about power, about rewriting her own story of failure into one of dominance. Then came Derek, her part-time deputy boyfriend, who wasn't officially part of the HOA but acted like its enforcer. Derek was the kind of man who wore his badge like a crown, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting his own inflated sense of importance. He started patrolling our streets in his cruiser, his radio crackling as he drove slowly past each house, his eyes scanning for any sign of noncompliance. He'd knock on doors under the guise of code enforcement, asking to measure window frames or check the hue of porch paint, his boots heavy on our welcome mats. Some neighbors, like the Wilsons across the street, welcomed the attention, saying it made them feel secure. "He's just doing his job," Mrs. Wilson told me one day, her voice tinged with forced cheer as she adjusted her perfectly compliant mailbox flag. But others, like the Garcias 2 doors down, started locking their gates, their kids no longer playing in the front yard. I overheard Mrs. Garcia whispering to her husband one evening, her voice trembling as she clutched a dish towel. "He took pictures of our backyard without asking Linda. What's next? Are they going to fine us for breathing too loudly?" The air in Sunny Elm grew heavy, the kind of tension you could feel in your bones, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon, dark and unyielding. The neighborhood's spirit was eroding under Melissa's rule. I started noticing the small, heartbreaking changes. The Wilsons stopped hosting their annual 4th of July barbecue, a tradition that had once filled the street with the smell of grilled hot dogs and the sound of firecrackers, all because Melissa had fined them $75 for noise violations the previous year. The Garcias kids no longer played soccer in the street, their laughter replaced by an eerie silence that felt louder than any noise. Even Mrs. Harper, 86 and half deaf, stopped sitting on her porch, her rocking chair empty after Melissa fined her $40 for excessive birdbath moss. I'd visit Mrs. Harper sometimes, bringing her a slice of Tom's lemon cake, the kind with a glaze so sweet it made your teeth ache. She'd sit in her dim living room, the curtains drawn, and whisper, "I don't understand, Linda. I've lived here 30 years, and now I'm afraid to step outside." Her hands trembled as she spoke, her fingers tracing the edge of her teacup, and I felt a pang of guilt for not doing more, for not speaking up sooner. Fear had a way of silencing us all. Melissa had rigged the HOA votes, controlled the meetings, and declared herself president for life, her clipboard a scepter she wielded with ruthless precision. Melissa's rules grew more absurd with each passing month. She banned non-neutral garden hoses, claiming they disrupted the visual harmony of the neighborhood, and fined the Wilsons $80 for a blue hose they'd used to water their petunias during a drought. She outlawed excessive holiday lights, fining the Petersons $120 for a string of Christmas lights that had been up one day past the HOA's approved removal date. She even issued a $45 fine to Mrs. Harper for unauthorized birdbath algae, despite the fact that Mrs. Harper could barely see the birdbath through her cataracts. Each fine was a power play, a reminder that Melissa was watching, always watching, her clipboard a ledger of our supposed sins. I started hiding our garden hose behind a bush, even though I knew it was ridiculous. But that's what Melissa had done to us. She'd turned us into shadows of ourselves, afraid of our own shadows. When Emily came home, everything changed. She'd been away for years, serving on classified missions that she'd never speak of, not even to me. She was always quiet, my Emily, mowing our lawn every Saturday morning with a precision that made the grass look like a putting green, calling everyone sir or ma'am, even our tabby, Whiskers, who'd meow back as if she understood. But Melissa took one look at her and decided she was trouble. "She looks too intense," Melissa told me one day, her lips pursed as she eyed Emily's Jeep parked in our driveway, its black exterior gleaming in the sunlight. "In that vehicle, it's too large for community standards. The tires exceed the curb line by 2 inches. And that flag you've got up? It's provocative symbolism, Linda. It sends the wrong message." I stared at her, dumbfounded. Our American flag, which Tom had raised every morning since we moved in, provocative? We ignored her, thinking she'd move on to her next target. But then the fines started piling up. $75 for the Jeep, $100 for the flag, $50 for unauthorized lawn decor, because of a small ceramic frog Emily had placed near our roses. A gift from a friend she'd met during her first tour. Each fine was a jab, a reminder that Melissa held the reins, and we were expected to fall in line, our every move scrutinized. Every night, I'd lie awake, the hum of the air conditioner mixing with the pounding of my heart as I replayed Melissa's latest threat in my mind. I'd seen what Emily had been through, letters she'd sent from overseas, her handwriting steady but her words heavy with unspoken pain. She'd written once about a night in a desert village, the stars so bright they felt like a mockery of the chaos below, where she'd had to make a choice that saved her team but left her with nightmares. She'd survived war zones, but now she was facing a different kind of battle, one I couldn't protect her from. I'd watch her from the kitchen window as she mowed the lawn, her movements mechanical, her face unreadable, and I'd wonder, what if Melissa pushes her too far? What if she breaks under this pressure after all she's endured? The fear was a cold knot in my stomach, a constant reminder of how powerless I felt against Melissa's reign. I'd clutch Tom's hand under the covers, whispering, "We have to do something," but he'd just sigh, his voice heavy with resignation. "What can we do, Linda? She's got everyone scared." Emily's return wasn't just a homecoming, it was a reckoning. She'd served 4 tours, led operations that were never written down, her name whispered in military circles with a mix of awe and respect. But those missions had taken their toll. I'd noticed the changes in her over the years, the way she'd flinch at sudden noises, the way she'd scan a room before entering, her eyes always searching for exits. She'd once told me, in a rare moment of vulnerability, about a mission in a mountain pass where her team had been ambushed, the air thick with dust and the screams of her comrades. She'd made a split-second decision, let a civilian go, knowing he might be a threat, or take the shot and live with the guilt. She'd chosen mercy, and it had saved her team, but the weight of that choice still haunted her, a shadow that followed her even into the sunny streets of sunny Elm Estates. Now, facing Melissa's petty tyranny, she felt that same weight, the fear of losing control, of letting her emotions take over. She'd whisper to herself sometimes, when she thought I couldn't hear, "Stay focused. Don't let her win." It was a mantra, a lifeline, as she channeled her training into a new kind of mission, protecting her family from a suburban tyrant. The tension reached a boiling point that fateful day on our lawn. Emily was hanging a hummingbird feeder on our ancient maple tree, a ritual that brought her a rare moment of peace. I watched from the porch, the air thick with summer heat, the scent of freshly cut grass mingling with the faint sweetness of the sugar water she was pouring. Hummingbirds darted around her, their wings a blur of iridescent green, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of a smile on her face, the kind of smile I hadn't seen since she was a little girl chasing butterflies in our old backyard in Ohio. She'd always loved hummingbirds, ever since she was 5, and we'd visited a nature reserve where she'd watched them hover like tiny jewels in the air. "They're so brave, Mom," she'd said then, her voice full of wonder. "So small, but they fight for every sip." Now, as she hung the feeder, I saw that same wonder in her eyes, a fleeting glimpse of the girl she'd been before the world had hardened her. But then Melissa stormed up our walkway, her visor tilted like a general's cap, Derek trailing behind her with his badge gleaming in the sunlight. "You're violating Code 7.9C, unauthorized wildlife attractants." Melissa barked, her voice sharp enough to slice through the humidity, her pen already scratching across her clipboard with a sound that grated on my nerves. Emily turned, a handful of sugar water still in her palm, and raised an eyebrow, her hazel eyes narrowing slightly. "Are you serious?" she asked, her tone steady but laced with a disbelief that mirrored my own. That's when Derek unholstered his gun, pointing it at my daughter with no warning, his face a mask of rage, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the veins in his neck. My heart stopped. I could smell the grass, feel the sweat on my neck, and hear my own scream caught in my throat as the world slowed to a crawl. The gun's barrel glinted in the sunlight, a cold, metallic threat aimed at my child, and all I could think was, this can't be happening. Not here. Not over a hummingbird feeder. I wanted to run to her, to shield her with my body, but my legs felt like lead, rooted to the porch as if the fear had turned me to stone. But Emily didn't flinch. Her hazel eyes locked onto Derek's, and a chilling calm washed over her, the kind that made my skin prickle with a mix of awe and terror. She stood there, her posture relaxed but her gaze unyielding, as if she were staring down an enemy combatant in a war zone rather than a power-tripping deputy in a suburban cul-de-sac. Then she smiled, not a warm smile, but one that whispered, "You've just made the worst mistake of your HOA reign." I felt the air shift, as if the universe itself had taken a breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The hummingbirds scattered, their wings a frantic buzz as they fled the tension, leaving behind a silence that was louder than any gunshot. What if Derek's finger twitched on the trigger, just for a moment, as a bead of sweat rolled down his temple? The tension was unbearable. Would he fire? Or was this just a bluff to scare us into submission? Emily's calm was unnerving, but I couldn't shake the fear that one wrong move could turn this petty dispute into a tragedy. The unanswered question hung in the air like a storm cloud, dark and heavy, as I held my breath, praying for a miracle. Melissa stood on the sidewalk, her arms folded, her smirk growing wider as if she knew something we didn't, her confidence a dagger in my chest. What if she'd planned this all along, a trap to provoke Emily into a reaction she could use against us? Let's rewind to understand how we got here. Melissa's tyranny began 2 years ago when she took over the HOA board. No one else wanted the job. Our first mistake. She started with newsletters and holiday banners, but power turned her into a suburban tyrant, rewriting bylaws like they were sacred edicts. She fined the Petersons for a too festive lawn Santa, the Garcias for excessive marigold vibrancy, and even old Mr. Thompson for unapproved mailbox decals because of that tiny fish sticker his grandson had given him. Her schnauzer, Biscuit, trotted beside her as she measured mailboxes with a ruler, her voice cheery but her eyes cold as she issued fine after fine. I still remember the sting of her $60 fine for our mailbox, the way her words echoed in my mind as I watered my daisies in 92-degree heat, the sun beating down on my neck like a punishment. "Neutral tones only for hoses, Linda," she'd said, her smile as fake as the plastic flamingos she'd banned from the neighborhood, her words a constant reminder of her control. Melissa's rules grew more absurd with each passing month. She banned non-neutral garden hoses, claiming they disrupted the visual harmony of the neighborhood, and fined the Wilsons $80 for a blue hose they'd used to water their petunias during a drought. She outlawed excessive holiday lights, fining the Petersons $120 for a string of Christmas lights that had been up one day past the HOA's approved removal date. She even issued a $45 fine to Mrs. Harper for unauthorized birdbath algae, despite the fact that Mrs. Harper could barely see the birdbath through her cataracts. Each fine was a power play, a reminder that Melissa was watching, always watching, her clipboard a ledger of our supposed sins. I started hiding our garden hose behind a bush, even though I knew it was ridiculous. But that's what Melissa had done to us. She'd turned us into shadows of ourselves, afraid of our own shadows. Emily's return from her final tour intensified the conflict. She'd seen things no one should, missions that left scars she'd never show, not even to me. I'd find her sometimes, staring out the window at the maple tree, her hands clenched into fists as if she were fighting an invisible enemy. I knew she was struggling, though she'd never admit it. She'd served 4 tours, led operations that were never written down, and yet the only thing that seemed to rattle her was Melissa's petty drama. When Melissa fined us $200 for Emily's Jeep tires crossing the curb line, I saw a flicker of frustration in her eyes, quickly replaced by a steely resolve. She didn't argue, just nodded, too calm, the kind of calm that made me nervous. I didn't know then that she was already planning, her operative training kicking in as she began documenting every move Melissa made. She'd sit at the kitchen table late at night, her laptop screen casting a blue glow on her face, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she cross-referenced HOA bylaws with the fines we'd received. "It's all public record, Mom," she'd say, her voice steady, but her eyes burning with determination. "She can't hide from this." One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Melissa and Derek showed up unannounced at our door. I opened it to find Melissa holding a new citation, $1.94, excessive porch clutter, because I'd left a pair of gardening gloves on the railing. Derek stood behind her, his arms crossed, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting the dying light as he smirked. "You've got 48 hours to comply, or the fine doubles," Melissa said, her voice dripping with satisfaction as she handed me the paper, her nails painted a garish shade of coral. Emily overheard from the hallway and stepped forward, her jaw tight. "This is harassment," she said, her voice low but firm, her eyes locking onto Melissa's with an intensity that made the air crackle. Melissa laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that echoed in the stillness of the evening. "It's called enforcement, dear," she said, her smirk widening as she turned to leave, Derek following like a loyal hound. That night, Emily didn't sleep. She sat in the garage, sorting through her growing pile of evidence, her hands steady but her breathing uneven, the weight of the confrontation fueling her resolve. Derek's inspections escalated the tension further. He and Melissa roamed the neighborhood with cameras and a laminated HOA manual, citing people for faded shutters or unapproved porch pillows. They'd knock on doors at odd hours, their flashlights cutting through the evening gloom as they demanded to inspect backyards, their voices carrying a threat that made your skin crawl. I'd catch myself hiding our garden hose behind a bush, even though I knew it was ridiculous. But that's what Melissa had done to us. She'd turned us into shadows of ourselves, afraid of our own shadows. Emily stayed quiet, but I'd catch her late at night, her laptop screen glowing as she compiled screenshots, dates, and Melissa's questionable decisions, her face set with a determination that both comforted and terrified me. She found HOA bylaws online, cross-referencing every fine, her fingers moving with the precision of someone who defused bombs under pressure, her training a shield against the chaos Melissa had created. The hummingbird feeder became the breaking point. Emily hung it to find peace, watching the tiny birds dart through the morning mist, their wings a symphony of motion that seemed to soothe her in a way nothing else could. She'd sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks, as the hummingbirds flitted around her, their tiny bodies shimmering in the sunlight. But Melissa called it wildlife disruption under Code 7.9c, fining us $350 despite 3 other houses having feeders. They're next, Melissa sneered, her pen slashing across her clipboard as she stood on our lawn, her eyes gleaming with a twisted satisfaction. Emily's response was a quiet, "Okay," but I knew that tone, it meant war. She planted lavender along our walkway, HOA legal, she'd checked, and Melissa accused us of floral aggression, holding a solo emergency meeting to ban natural plants without approval. Emily appealed, was denied, and we were fined $600. That night, I found her in the garage, sorting a stack of documents thicker than a novel, her face set with determination as she whispered, "She's going down." Emily wasn't the only one fighting back. Others were starting to wake up. I started hosting secret coffee mornings at our house, inviting the Petersons, the Garcias, and even Mrs. Harper, who'd shuffle over with her cane, her eyes bright with a fire I hadn't seen in years. We'd sit around my kitchen table, the scent of brewed coffee mixing with the tension in the air, as we shared our stories. The Petersons told us about a $90 fine for unapproved window shades, even though they lived in their house for 15 years without issue. The Garcias revealed that Derek had taken photos of their daughter's playhouse, claiming it was too close to the property line, and fined them $120. Mrs. Harper, her voice trembling but firm, showed us a stack of citations, 29 in total, all for vague reasons like excessive porch clutter, because she'd left a potted plant out overnight. "I can't take it anymore," she said, her hands clutching her mug so tightly I thought it might crack. We all nodded, the weight of our shared anger binding us together like a thread. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rumbled in the distance, we gathered in the Garcias basement, the air damp and heavy with the smell of wet earth. Mr. Garcia had set up a folding table, and we spread out our evidence, fines, photos, recordings, like soldiers planning a battle. Mrs. Peterson, usually so reserved, slammed her fist on the table, her voice shaking with rage. She fined us $150 for a Halloween decoration, a plastic skeleton. She said it was disturbing the community aesthetic. My kids cried for days. The room erupted in murmurs, each story fueling our resolve. Emily stood at the head of the table, her voice calm but commanding. "We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for Sunny Elm. We take her down together." The thunder outside seemed to echo our determination, a storm of our own making brewing in that basement. Emily took our stories and turned them into a weapon. She'd been gathering evidence for weeks, videos of Derek yelling at neighbors, photos of Melissa trespassing to measure flower beds, audio recordings of HOA meetings where Melissa voted for herself using fake proxies. She compiled it all into a 50-page dossier, each page labeled and timestamped with a precision that reflected her training. She even found a whistleblower, a former HOA treasurer named Clara, who'd been bullied out by Melissa 2 years ago after questioning a $500 miscellaneous expense. Clara met us in secret at a park outside the neighborhood, her hand shaking as she handed Emily a letter detailing Melissa's financial misdeeds. She threatened to fine me $1,000 if I ever spoke out, Clara whispered, her eyes darting around as if Melissa might appear from behind a tree. Emily placed a hand on her shoulder, her voice steady. You're safe now. We've got this. Clara nodded, tears welling in her eyes, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. The turning point came at an emergency HOA meeting Melissa called, uninviting us. Emily showed up in her dress uniform, not to intimidate, but to remind them who she was, someone who'd fought for freedom. She sat in the back, silent, as Melissa ranted about subversive residents and the need for tighter control, her voice echoing through the clubhouse, her visor casting a shadow on the wall. Then Emily raised her hand, her voice steady as she asked, "Can you explain why HOA funds paid for cameras aimed at my family's home without a vote or permit?" She held up a bank record, check number 4921. Una. Authorized security purchase, $800 of community funds spent without approval. Melissa stammered, her face paling as she fumbled for an excuse, but the room turned. Whispers grew into mutters. She used our money? How did we not know? Emily didn't need to say more. She'd planted the seed, and the community was finally waking up. The final straw came the next morning. Derek returned with 2 officers, claiming a safety report demanding Emily remove our flagpole, deemed a hazard after 8 years. She refused, her voice calm but firm, and Derek drew his gun again, his face red with humiliation. Emily didn't move, her voice ice cold. This is being recorded. It was our doorbell cam, Emily's hidden camera, and a neighbor's phone captured it all. Unbeknownst to Derek, Emily had secured a temporary restraining order against him the day before, making his presence a violation. Within hours, Real County deputies arrived, not for Emily, but for Derek. He was cuffed on our lawn as Melissa shrieked, her clipboard falling to the ground with a hollow thud, a sound that echoed like the end of her reign. As Derek was being cuffed, Melissa whispered something to one of the officers, her eyes darting toward Emily with a look of pure venom. The officer hesitated, his hand resting on his radio, and for a moment, I feared Melissa had some hidden ally, some final card to play. The uncertainty lingered like a shadow, keeping us on edge as we waited to see if justice would truly prevail. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound drowning out the chirping of the birds as I gripped the porch railing, my knuckles white with fear. Melissa's downfall didn't end with the hearing. She filed a defamation lawsuit against Sunny Elm Estates, claiming emotional distress and demanding $300,000. But this time, she faced the entire community. At the trial, evidence of her forged votes, illegal checks, and the hummingbird feeder email, now a viral meme, sealed her fate. Emily testified, her voice steady. I fought for freedom overseas, only to come home and watch a neighbor steal it with fines and fear. The judge dismissed the case, ordering Melissa to repay $20,000 in legal fees, every cent she'd stolen, with interest. Her accounts were frozen, her condo lease terminated, her name a cautionary tale. Sunny Elm Estates bloomed anew. The new HOA board, real neighbors, not tyrants, threw a block party. Kids biked freely, dogs barked without fear, and garden frogs returned in all their quirky glory. Emily declined a board seat, choosing quiet mornings with her hummingbirds, but a neighbor gave her a sign, HOA Hero of Sunny Elm. She hung it by our flag, a symbol of resilience. As we walked the block one evening, the sunset casting golden hues over the maples, Emily looked at the feeder and said, "Peace feels louder when you fought for it." I nodded, the weight of our journey settling into a quiet courage we'd carry forward. Reflecting on this, I see the universal truth. Courage isn't always loud. It's in the quiet resolve to stand up, to document, to unite. We learned that power thrives in apathy, but community and justice can uproot even the deepest tyranny. What's your story of standing up to a petty tyrant? Share it in the comments. Whether it's an HOA nightmare or a small act of defiance, we'd love to hear how you found your courage. Let's build a community of resilience together on Daily Narrated Stories. Sunny Elm taught us to stay vigilant, to fight for what's right, and to never underestimate the power of a hummingbird feeder or a determined daughter. Thanks to Daily Narrated Stories, we're sharing these life-changing tales that inspire hope and action. If this story stirred your heart or sparked a memory, don't wait. Subscribe to Daily Narrated Stories right now. We're racing to 1,000 subscribers, and your click could make all the difference. Like, comment, and share this video to spread the message. Justice always finds a way. Time's ticking. Join our family of story lovers today, and let's keep the inspiration alive.